So if we scramble down this bank here beside Orient Way, we'll hopefully get our first sighting of the Dagenham Brook. Down we go. There, that greenish water through this railing is the Dagenham Brook. And I'm going to follow it along its course. But first of all, I've got to get out of this trap I found myself in, back through the brambles. Urban river hunting is not an easy thing. Sometimes, someone's had a more difficult journey than me. That's a bike wheel down there. Right, let's find the river up here, if I can ever free myself from this bramble. So this is the Dagenham Brook, and this is a much more comfortable view of it than I had down that bank and through those bushes further along. That was near the point where the Dagenham Brook meets, well, it's a tributary of the River Lea. I think it must actually combine with the Fuller Brook, somewhere underneath the new Leyton sign, and then they run into the River Lea. And I think the point where it meets the Lea must be underground. I've shown the Dagenham Brook before. It's interesting though, it looks a lot clearer and cleaner than the last time I was here. It's often quite muddy, and today the water seems very clear. And you can see here they've put in this pavement as well to improve access to this area. So here we're walking alongside the Dagenham Brook, and we're on the edge of Marsh Lane Fields. I've made a video about this area before, and it's one of my favourite places in London. I know I sort of seem to say that a lot, but this really is in my top 5 special places. And if you'd walked along this path, I don't know, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the weeds were up to here. This was completely impassable along here. I suppose now more people may have an awareness of the Dagenham Brook here, and maybe more people use this space as a result. That's where I disagree. I don't think you should judge the value of a place on how well used it is by humans. The more overgrown it is sometimes, and the wilder it is, and the more people stay away from it, the more it allows the wildlife to reclaim that space. So human utility shouldn't be the metric by which we value spaces. But sadly that seems to be the case. However, this is lovely. There you go, here's the river again. There's a really kind of dark green weed, or like a dye or a weed in the river. I hope that's not some sort of form of pollution. This is the clubhouse for Eton Manor Athletics Club, and it celebrated its centenary a couple of years ago, so it's been going now for over 100 years. There's a plaque up there. I talked about this in the Marsh Lane video I made, so it's probably worth, I'll put a link either above or below, or maybe both, to that video, and it tells you more about some of the history of this site. I've made a few videos here, but briefly, this has been quite a contested space over time, and it's had to be defended from being developed on 2 previous occasions in the past, and actually more recently 10 years ago in the run-up to the Olympics, when it could easily have all been built over. In the end, just a patch of it was lost when they relocated the Eton Manor garden allotments here. This is the swanky new bridge, which I think caused consternation due to its hefty price tag. Looks like it's celebrating scenes from the life of Marsh Lane Fields, which they've given a new name, and I refuse to acknowledge the new name, so we should just refer to it as Marsh Lane Fields. And here's the Dagenham Brook trundling on beneath the expensive bridge. I first came here just after I moved to Leytonstone in 2006, and the new Lammas Lands Defence Committee organised a beating of the bounds around the Leyton Lammas lands, and this was on that beating of the bounds, and it was here that one of the symbolic bumping of the heads of the young people was carried out, and willow wands were cast into the water. It was a wonderful occasion. There's a post on my blog about it that I'll link to below. And I just moved to Leytonstone from the Angel, so I come from a very urban environment. I just moved over here, and that beating of the bounds here, organised by the brilliant new Lammas Lands Defence Committee and the sadly departed Katie Andrews, really did introduce me to the wonders of this area. And I've kind of been in love with this particular patch of ground here ever since. So it may start to get difficult to follow the Dagenham Brook here. It runs through an industrial estate where they make the fantastic signature brew beer. But we'll pick it up, I think, on the Lea Bridge Road. So this is an interesting series of streets around here. These houses were built in the 1880s, and they're sort of referred to as Warner houses, or the Warner estate. And they were developed as good quality, affordable homes in that late Victorian period. And they kind of stayed that way into the 1960s, when they started to be sold off. If you want to know more, about this, there is an interesting history to it. An artist called Lucy Harrison, who lives locally, has written about this and created a project, and some of that material is viewable online. I think there's kind of pointed roofs and the double-fronted doors. That's a kind of emblem of the Warner houses. Quite distinctive. You really notice when you walk around the area when you arrive in a Warner street. So this is the abandoned football ground of Leyton FC. There's a video on my channel here about that. I'll link above, below, etc. And the Dagenham Brook runs around one end of the ground, so we'll just go around to up Lea Bridge Road, and we can see the river where it passes behind the ground here. So here's the Dagenham Brook passing behind the ground of Leyton FC, not to be confused with Leyton Orient, of course. Sadly, the club are no longer in operation, but the ground is still there. And then the river, you can see, goes under Lea Bridge Road. And it goes along the backs of houses. And Lea Bridge Road is one of London's great principal thoroughfares, an ancient way. Parts of a Roman road were excavated where it crosses the marshes. And a lot of times the Romans just built over pre-existing trackways, so who knows how old this road really is. So the Dagenham Brook runs along the backs of these houses and the ones in the adjacent street. So I have to walk along here and pick the river up and get a sight of it just near the end. And here are some more Warner houses. This is part of the Warner estate still. So walking down the street here, I bumped into Lucy Harrison, who I mentioned earlier on, who's a fantastic project about these houses and actually knows something about them. What can you tell us about the Warner houses?
Well, these are actually mostly flats
right.
to start. This street was built in 1906. So they started in about 1895 and kind of carried on building this style up until about 1910. They were all rented when they were initially built, so they're all rented from the Warner estate. And everyone talks about the fact that they all used to be identical, so they had kind of green and cream paintwork, beautifully cut hedges, because all the staff would come around and cut the hedges and things like that. And so it kind of looked very nice, uniform, tidy streets, and because all the Warner staff would come and look after them. But then they began selling them off at different times. So this whole estate was sold off to a freeholder in the 60s, I think. So it hasn't been owned for a long time by the Warner estate.
Very distinctive looking, aren't they? They
Yeah.
they look very particular. What's going on with is it gabling, the pointed?
Yeah, so they kind of varied them in quite nice ways. They've got these kind of archways with the two doorways. So that's the upstairs and the downstairs flats have their own separate entrances. So it's quite nice that they're kind of self-contained, so it feels like a house. It's even though it's actually a flat, the upstairs flat has their own entrance that goes straight upstairs, and then they share the garden at the back as well. So you have to get on with your neighbour because you share the garden with your neighbour.
And in your case, you share the brook, the Dagenham Brook.
Yes, we do. We have the brook at the bottom of the garden, so you can hear ducks sometimes.
And what tips can you give me for the rest of my quest along the Dagenham Brook?
Then there's a mysterious open space up there that you might be able to break into or something.
Oh, really?
There's a floodplain,
Yeah.
which every now and then people ask on a Facebook group, kind of, what's this park I can see on the map? It says Lee Valley Park. How do I get into it? And you can't really get into it. But kids used to go in and kind of play games and do target practice and things like that down there. But it's actually just a kind of fenced off floodplain up there.
What a great bit of serendipity to meet you along the course of the Dagenham Brook.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence.
Who'd have thought? You
Yeah.
dug me out of a hole with my lack of knowledge about.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your tour.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. So here's the Dagenham Brook, running behind the houses of Blythe Road. I'm not sure what the road is. And this is Bridge Road, where the river crosses. Behind the houses of Hibbert Road and Blythe Road. It's a fairly interesting street architecturally. This is like those almost kind of classic postcard images of suburbia from the 30s and 40s. You can imagine them sort of ink drawn in newspapers advertising the new estate. These houses sort of make me think of a man in a cardigan with a pipe and slippers having a whiskey after work in his armchair. Along Mark House Road now, firmly in Walthamstow at this point, and after being pushed away from the river, access is going to be thin on the ground for a short period of time, I think, or I hope a short period of time. This is Luther King Close. There are allotments along the course of the Dagenham Brook. I suppose it probably works in two levels. There's land that probably couldn't be used for building, but there's a lot of water here. As I said before, a lot of it runs down off the high ground around Epping Forest, but also, if you look at the old OS maps, there's lots of ditches and pools and ponds in this area. And the allotment holders often talk of water coming up in the allotments in wet weather. It's getting windy. The autumn winds are rising, coming to blow the summer away. Fantastic old route master. Look, with a poster for the opening of the Victoria line, which dates it to the late 60s. I think, is it 1968? Maybe 1967, 1968. And here it is. Quite difficult to see. It's really quite overgrown along here, isn't it? When you compare it with Marsh Lane Fields, it's in slightly better shape on the other side of the road. Runs along the side of some football pitches here. So the Dagenham Brook runs along the north side of these football pitches. Can't quite see what football team that is actually. Really following a stream, a brook or a urban river. More than following the watercourse, it's really just a way of sort of opening up the landscape, particularly suburban landscapes, which may on first appearances not seem like they hold a great deal. And the simple device of just following a river or a stream just kind of unlocks it for you and takes you to places you might not otherwise go. This is the end of the W19 bus route. I've seen it so many times, W19 Argyle Avenue, but I've never actually been down here. And I wouldn't have seen the Pump House Museum back there as well, the Walthamstow Pump House Museum. So in a way, seeing little of the brook here doesn't really matter so much. And there's the W19 on its way to Ilford. Lovely park here in Essex Road, Walthamstow. I wish you could smell these roses. Very pungent. Fantastic old brick electricity substation here on the edge of St James's Park. St James Park, Walthamstow. Wonderful avenue of trees on the edge of St James Park here. The path seems to lead on in the direction of the Dagenham Brook and the River Lea flood relief channel. So perhaps there's access. Let's give it a go. Let's see what's on the other side of this bridge. Here's our friend, the Dagenham Brook, running free and clear. Apart from that metal grill dumped in the river. So here's the River Lea flood relief channel, and the Dagenham Brook runs parallel now. I've seen some debate online about whether the Dagenham Brook is a natural river or whether it is in fact like a man-made channel, like a drainage channel that predates, I suppose, the River Lea flood relief channel. And there are a number of man-made rivers that are quite old in the Olympic Park. Some of the bow-back rivers are believed to have been created at the time of Alfred the Great in order to drain water from the River Lea and strand a Viking fleet up the Lea Valley. Or then some of them may have also been created to drain the marshes. So it's a possibility that this was created to drain the marshes. Look at this wonderful bit of prose painted on the side wall of a house on Chester Road.
The first time
here's the Lea flood relief channel. Question is, where's the Dagenham Brook gone? Surely not swallowed up just yet. And this wonderful mural. This is the wall at the other end of the terrace, where there's that beautiful verse. You have a great mural. One thing you can definitely say about Walthamstow is that there's a great deal of civic pride here. So this is where I will bid adieu to the Dagenham Brook for today. Seems to have been temporarily swallowed by the River Lea flood relief channel, but it does run on for about another 500 yards before again running into the River Lea. I'm going to depart here in Coppermill Lane. I've got to go and pick the kids up from school. But it's been a great walk along the Dagenham Brook, this unheralded and modest tributary of the River Lea, full of wonders and surprises. And you can see where the brook meets the River Lea flood relief channel here. It continues along before they merge finally just the other side of Black Horse Road.